At no point in the world of dieting and weight loss does anyone talk about how to stay weight stable, how to have a management process in place. Because let's face it, is your goal actually to lose weight, or is your goal to lose weight and then to stay at that weight? Because if it's the latter, which I'm assuming it is, you have to learn to eat in a way that you can stick with forever. Now, that's not saying you're going to be dieting forever, but a large chunk of the changes that you make day to day are going to be worth sticking to try and maintain your new body weight. And if the only thing you know is restriction to lose weight, how on earth do you expect to maintain that weight that you've lost? Hello and welcome to the Smart Strength Training Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about popular trends and we look at it through an evidence-based lens. Now, hopefully you're tuning into this episode following up off the back of my last episode, all about calories. Do calories matter? Because today I want to talk about how to lose weight, lose body fat without tracking calories. We have a problem. I work in this industry and I primarily work with women that are over 30, I would say, and a large percentage of my clients have tracked using probably some sort of app, and it's become an obsession. Calories has become something they really focus on. They then become very terrified of certain food groups and ended up with some sort of disordered eating behavior. Now, I'm not saying that tracking calories specifically causes this behavior. More than anything, the way that nutrition is discussed on social media and media as a whole, tracking has just sort of tapped into a mindset that was already on a path towards slightly disordered eating behaviors and just exacerbated it. In the last episode, I spoke about how the energy you consume does matter, but that does not mean you have to track to be successful. So I want you to understand how to lose body weight, body fat without tracking. But I think it's really important that we discuss why diets don't work. Because if you understand the reasons behind why people struggle, then you can arm yourself with a toolbox to try and make sure you don't fall into these traps. So the main one I would say is that people are too aggressive. People's idea of dieting or reducing calories is simply eating chicken and broccoli, endless amounts of boring salads, which just reduces energy intake so much that it is just way too aggressive. And in being too aggressive, it's often then second too restrictive, getting rid of all the foods that you actually really enjoy eating because you're trying to quote unquote be good. Too much restriction, too low energy intake will definitely lead to that kind of like fuck it mindset where people end up saying like I binged this weekend, but effectively if you just eat foods that are just boring and you're not enjoying it at all, at some point in time, willpower will run out and you're going to struggle to sustain that. And the next is people just diet for too long. People diet for too long with no breaks in their diet. So just trying to eat at low energy intakes for too long a period of time is just a foolish thing to try to do. Another one is people trying to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. I think it's really important to state, I've already stated it probably twice before on other episodes, that if you're trying to build muscle or lose fat, do them separately. Do not try to do them at the same time. A big one, this next one, is dieting. It makes logical sense to diet up to like a holiday or a wedding. But if you've got no clear plan of how on earth you're going to sustain that weight loss afterwards, that's going to really lead you up a very anxious path. So as much as I like the idea of dieting up to a specific point, you have to be very careful doing it up to sort of significant dates, because then if you're on holiday for 2 weeks and you've just spent the last 12 weeks dieting, that's going to cause a lot of stress and anxiety. And the last one is the huge one, and it's the one that I've already touched on already. At no point in the world of dieting and weight loss does anyone talk about how to stay weight stable, how to have a management process in place. Because let's face it, is your goal actually to lose weight, or is your goal to lose weight and then to stay at that weight? Because if it's the latter, which I'm assuming it is, you have to learn to eat in a way that you can stick with forever. Now, that's not saying you're going to be dieting forever, but a large chunk of the changes that you make day to day are going to be worth sticking to try and maintain your new body weight. And if the only thing you know is restriction to lose weight, how on earth do you expect to maintain that weight that you've lost? Because the most important thing to appreciate, which I've touched on already on our previous podcast, if you're successful with your weight loss and you are now a lighter framed human being, it takes less energy to propel a lighter framed human being around. Let's say you were successful and you lost 10 kilos. On average, it needs about 200 calories fewer per day to sustain that new weight. Now, that's not a broken metabolism. Nothing is wrong. It's a very logical, predictable reduction in energy requirements because you are now lighter. If you were to fill your car full of very heavy objects, the fuel efficiency would become poor. And if you would lighten that car, the fuel efficiency would improve. There's no reason why human bodies would be any different. Before we get into the conversation about what to do, I also think it's worthwhile stating this next question. Make sure you think about the overall time frame you intend to be in a lowered energy intake. If you do have 10 kilos to lose, and let's say you're basing that off a half a kilo per week loss in body fat, so you're looking at a minimum of 20 weeks in a diet phase. Are you realistically going to be dieting for 5 months nonstop? Or is it worth doing 10 weeks now and try and get 5 kilos off and then spending a couple of months staying stable, learning how to manage that body weight before going back into another 10 weeks worth of dieting at a lowered energy intake? So setting yourself up for failure from the get-go is a classic thing people do. Coming into this year, of course, many people had quite robust weight loss goals. And sadly, predictably, they've already struggled and have stopped. Trying, not planning, is just one of the things that will always be a major issue. Think about it practically. Are you planning on dieting over the summer when you have 2 summer holidays, the kids are off school? Like, is that really a sensible time to be trying to lose weight? Or like I said, wouldn't it be smart to do 10 weeks now, 12 weeks now, then take a break over this summer and then just try and stay weight stable during the summer, then go back into a second weight loss phase in the autumn? Could that not be a much more sensible strategy? Because when people think about losing weight, they very rarely think about strategy. They just go in too restrictive, very blind. So what are you going to do then? So I've got some main points that I want to kind of go through. Number one is what I classify as the low-hanging fruit approach. This should be the easiest to implement, most obvious thing to target. Have a review of the way that you consume food and think about where is the biggest challenge that you face. Do you mindlessly eat food in the car as you drive to work? Do you devour sweets in front of the TV of an evening? Is there a place in your diet that you can get some quick wins that you can just implement straight away that shouldn't have too much of a friction from a behavior standpoint? But things to consider. You want to make sure that what you're doing is going to be impactful enough. I've had so many funny conversations over the years, like people, okay, I'm going to stop adding a splash of milk to my coffee, or I have a biscuit with my cup of coffee at 11 o'clock. They're probably not going to make a huge difference, apart from they're probably going to suck the life out of you for the next few months. But if you are having 3 oat milk lattes per day, and when you do open those biscuits, you devour the entire carton, then yeah, okay, now we're talking about things that actually will be quite impactful. Things that you do frequently are worth thinking about. Are you adding peanut butter to a smoothie every single day? That energy that you're consuming will add up. You could make a really smart swap and use powdered nut butter so you get the flavor but at a lower energy intake. So that low-hanging fruit approach is a really nice one. That last point that I touched on, swapping from peanut butter to powdered peanut butter, because point number 2 is focusing on the most energy dense elements of what you eat. The amount of times people have said to me, Andy, I'm going to focus on portion size. Okay. What does portion size mean to you? So I'm going to have only half a slice of toast and I'm going to stop having pasta with my salad. Okay. But actually, bread doesn't contain much energy and pasta doesn't really contain much energy. I mean, yeah, if you load up that bread with tons of butter, or when you have pasta, you have like a carbonara and lots of creamy sauce, then yeah, because lots of energy will come from those additional bits. So understanding where the most energy dense elements of what you eat are, understanding what they are is super important. You don't need to track to do that, but you do need to be a little bit inquisitive and look at the back of a packet. So you could quite simply have jam instead of butter, and not obviously butter and jam, because that will yield less total energy. You could swap from a creamy sauce to a pesto, a low-fat pesto. Making these sort of shop bought changes can be really, really smart, because things like shop bought sauces are a really easy place to spot tons of additional energy coming in. So the example I use of low fat pesto is actually quite a smart thing to swap out, because the more things that you do that are automatic, that you just do via your shop and you haven't got to think about day to day, is a really great way to not have to think about it all the time. Now, I'm not saying that I want people to have a low fat diet, but I think it is worthwhile pointing out that there are 9 calories per gram of fat and there are 4 calories per gram of protein and carbs. So by being very purposeful with the fats that you consume can be very sensible. So looking for those choices, those changes, like I just mentioned, can be really smart. Now, I know people will jump on and say, yeah, but when you have low fat foods, they're always full of sweetener and sugars. No, they're not all the time. It really depends on which ones. And again, this is where you have to educate yourself. I get a little bit frustrated when people aren't prepared to put in any effort to educate themselves around the foods they consume. If you don't eat avocado, you haven't got a care in the world what avocado contains. But if you do eat hummus, and you recognize that actually, oh, look, hummus is made with quite a lot of olive oil, but often actually rapeseed oil is used. It's not a particularly high quality oil. And potentially I want to swap to a low fat hummus because that is up 50 to 70 calories less per serving. Oh, that's a really smart choice. I mentioned pesto. I also like things like strained yogurt, cream cheese, cottage cheese. They are really smart places to affect the energy composition of the food. And all you've done is make a shop bought change. Point number three is sort of similar, leading in from the last one. So you want to keep meal volume high. Now, that idea, again, when people start to say, Andy, I'm going to go and I'm going to not have bread, I'm not going to have pasta, that massively reduces portion size. Now, the problem with that is that you're going to be really hungry. And now here's the thing. The average person consumes eight times per day consumes energy. So trying to eat large meals to make sure we're not snacking mindlessly between meals is a really sensible thing to do. So if you are doing point 2, affecting the most energy dense elements of the plate, coming to this point, trying to keep meal volume high. Let's go to a classic breakfast. Eggs on toast with avocado. Now, when trying to be good, people would, like I mentioned, stop having bread, or let's say have a small piece of bread. But actually, if you just understand that avocado yields quite a lot of total fat, you've already got a fat source on that plate, which is the eggs. Let's say you also added butter to that. So I've got 3 layered fat sources. I don't need that much fat on a plate. So rather than just cutting the overall sub portion size, I could get rid of the avocado. I could have an extra slice of bread. So now I've actually increased the volume of food on that plate. You might even decide you want to have eggs on toast with one of those slices of bread and a little bit of jam on that other piece of bread with no butter. That's a really great way to increase meal volume, but I've reduced the total amount of energy on the plate. And that is the most important thing. But just today, again, I'm not telling people to go low fat, but just be very purposeful with the fats that you eat and recognize that you don't have to layer. The classic one is if you're using a non-stick pan, but the non-stick's gone and you're having to use a lot of oil to lubricate that pan. Really sensible thing to do is just to swap that pan out. That affects the energy density of the dishes that you consume in that. So yeah, energy density and meal volume, really important. Next is protein. Everyone's banging on the protein drum, which I think is very good in some ways, but I don't want people to micromanage protein. I think just to say have 1 to 2 palm-sized proportions of protein per meal is fine. Don't stress about it. Protein might help you stay more satiated. It's often stated to be the one that keeps you fullest for longer, but it also just means you're having balanced dishes. Next, point 5 is fruit and veg, because again, leading to the idea that we want to make sure we're boosting meal volume. Fruit and veg are often going to be the least energy dense things that you consume. Now, I'm not saying here that I want you consuming bucket loads of orange juice or blending all of your fruit into smoothies. I'm just saying ideally have whole fruit, whole veg. I'm just saying trying to make sure that you have fruit and or veg with all your meals is a really great way to manage hunger and boost nutrient quality. And it gives that meal volume we're looking for. Next up, point number 6. You're going to need a strategy. I mentioned a strategy for thinking about the time course you're going to be dieting for. Now, I think it's also worthwhile having a strategy for when you are going to face challenges, going to friends' houses for dinner, going out for dinner. If you know you're out for dinner Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in a week, you're going to have to make some decisions to manage the amount of energy that you consume. If you're going out 1 meal per week, you can probably just stick to the things I said above and not even think about it. But if you're out frequently in 1 week, or you live a life where you know that you socialize quite a lot, you're going to need to have a little bit of a think about this, because restaurant food contains a lot of energy, and it's a really sensible place to apply a little bit of a strategy to it. So let's say you're out 3 times this week, but one of the meals out, you're going out with your partner's friends, and they're not your friends, you like in the nice possible way, that's not where you really want to kind of like be relaxed. So you might decide, this is the one that I'm gonna just have a starter and a main. I'm actually not going to drink, I'm going to drive, and I'm going to place a little bit of focus on that one. But then you might have Sunday lunch with your family, and there you want to be a little bit more relaxed. Setting that expectation of yourself, I think, can be a really sensible thing to do. Going back to this idea that let's say you have got 3 meals out in the week, there is an option that you could eat a little bit lighter in the week to create what is often called a calorie buffer for the weekend. Now, notice I said the word a little bit lighter. Don't starve yourself in the week. Just reduce the total amount of energy you consume day to day by maybe not having snacks or flavored or energy containing drinks. Now, that will give you a little bit of wiggle room for maybe an extra glass of wine, maybe a dessert. It doesn't give you complete freedom just to go nuts and eat what you want, 3 courses, cheese board, the works. It's just going to give you a little bit more flexibility to have more of the food that you really enjoy. But like I said, we do not want to be super, super low on energy, because you'll be starving coming to the weekend. But I do think there's real sense in having a bit of a strategy. Finally, try not to be reactive in your approach to nutrition. The word guilty, feeling disappointed, feeling like a failure are words that I hear from people every single week, linked to the fact that they overconsumed energy at the weekend. Now, remember that just because you overconsume energy does not mean that you ruined your diet. There's this idea, let's say if we actually do talk about calories for a moment, let's say you're trying to aim for 1,500 calories per day. That doesn't mean that if you go over 1,500 calories that day, that you fail the diet that day. Energy is about the average over time. So let's say over a 4-week period, you eat 4 times per day. So you're going to have 112 meals, or 112 times that you consume food. If 100 of those times you made smart decisions and were mindful with your choices, those 12 where you ate a little bit more, they're going to be averaged out by the 100 good choices you made, which means that every small quality choice you can make actually does matter, because it will average out over time. So it is still, when you're out for dinner and it's going to be a struggle, maybe just not having the bread and butter as a starter actually is still something that's worth doing. It's still worth making smart choices. Unless, of course, the bread and butter brings you so much joy and that's what you love the most in the world, then of course you can have it. But I think it's really important to recognize that Just because someone overate does not mean they ruined everything. It is the sum of your behavior over a sustained period of time that really matters. And the issue with the reactive mindset, feeling guilty, is people do dumb shit when they think they've overeaten. They're going to fast the next day. I'm going to go and do Barry's twice this day. And it crushes people's energy. They feel absolutely exhausted. And then they're back into that feeling like, I just want to eat all the food in front of me. And they're going to binge, very much like if you over restrict what you do. You cannot and you should not rush weight loss. One of the things that hopefully came clear from the last podcast episode is a slower rate of weight loss done sustainably is the most sensible thing to do. You have to think long term. What you're trying to do is to stay weight stable at the end of a successful weight loss phase. So at the end of a 10-week period where you've lost 5 kilos, you then have to learn how to manage that weight. So you get to eat a bit more energy, which is really great. I'll do an episode on how to stay weight stable because that is a really interesting topic. But spending a couple of months, just like, let's say you came down to whatever, 10 kilos lighter over the course of your diet phase, you now have a task of managing that, keeping activity high. You get to eat more than you did during a diet phase, but not like you can't go back to what you were doing at the very, very, very start of your diet, which made you gain the weight in the first place. You can't go back there. You have to learn a new way of eating. So a lot of those sensible, mindful choices about going out for dinner, about keeping meal volume high, about prioritizing protein, guess what? That stuff has to stick long term. So a slower rate of weight loss, focusing on the sustainable element, always having your mind on the actual goal, which is keeping your weight stable at the end of a successful weight loss phase. So I hope over the course of the last 2 podcast episodes that has given you some clarity on calories and some tools that you can use to still affect the energy you consume without having to track your energy intake. And if you'd like help implementing these sort of strategies in your own diet and training, then I am available for one-on-one online training.